Okay.
I want to say hello to everybody. I want to welcome everybody here today to our first webinar of the Building Brand Awareness in the UK Market through Social Media series. I'll start off by introducing myself and the UK consumer team. I'm Evan Lynch and I'm the market advisor for global online marketplaces. And I'm working together with my colleagues, Rachel Sleet, who is the market advisor for consumer retail, and Anna Butler, who is the market executive for consumer retail. We have been working tirelessly over the last number of months to put together a comprehensive webinar series covering key topics such as today's session, the UK market overview, the role of the influencer in building brand awareness in the UK. And we'll also be hearing from the platforms themselves, such as Meta and TikTok, learning about their trends, their demographics, and how to succeed on their platforms. This is to give you, our clients, access to best-in-class speakers, advisors, and information. Today we're joined by Andrew, who is a UK retail expert, and Owen from Enterprise Ireland, who will be briefly discussing Enterprise Ireland supports. So without further ado, I want to hand over to today's speaker, Andrew. I'll stop sharing my screen right now, to introduce himself and to begin today's session.
Okay, thanks very much, Evan. So I will share mine, and as always, we cross our fingers and hope that the technology works. So here we go. So anyway, good morning, everybody, and yeah, thank you uh, for joining. So what I'm going to do in this session, we've got quite a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to go through it at a reasonable pace and try and keep everybody awake and all the rest of it. But what I'm going to cover, you'd have seen the what came out in the promotion for it, but basically just to confirm, I'm going to go through in a second what I feel are the after a little bit of introduction to myself, the four laws of retail as your customer sees it. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about setting the scene, if you like, in the UK retail market, customer behavior, how we got here. So a little bit of a sort of a history lesson, if you like, because I think it's quite an interesting story as to how we got to where we are today. Um, and that will lead to a little bit of covering what I call shopper Mark II. That's our shopping behavior, which I think is very relevant to this session. Uh, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking specifically about social media, and it probably won't surprise you to know that that will be focused on TikTok, and I'll explain why. Then we're going to look into the psychology of persuasion, influence, and we're going to look at a couple of examples of where brands have used either viral marketing or an influencer, and one example where it didn't work out so well, another one where it did. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with some takeaways from the session. So moving on for that, myself. Um, so yeah, as Evan said, I'm UK based. I've been in retail for over 30 years, and I've been a retailer. If I click through to the next slide, I've been a retailer. For those of you who know Beals, that was a long time ago, down in Bournemouth. That was my first retail job. I spent some time with Superdrug when they were part of Kingfisher. So I've got a retail background. For many years, I've been a retail writer. You can see some of the, I'm currently writing for Fortune, as in the Fortune 500, who I'm sure we're all familiar with. And I've written for a number of other media and retail titles. And I've also published a couple of books. You see them there. One, Harry was right all along, and I was at a conference. I speak at a lot of retail conferences around the world, and I was at one not so long ago, and I was asking people, well, who do you think the Harry was? Bearing in mind, you probably can't see it there, but the testimonial was is from Lord Mark Price, the former CEO of Waitrose. And somebody said, "Oh, Harry Potter," and I said, "Well, no, it's a retail book. It actually was Harry Selfridge." And if you want to, it's amazing. If you look back, if you Google Harry Selfridge quotes, you'll see that what he was talking about, 100 and well, over 100. It was 1909. He opened his store in Oxford Street. It's still very, very relevant today. And then the other one, just quickly, was something that I kept a diary through COVID lockdown and how COVID was impacting retail and how retail was uh, coping and adapting with the pressures and challenges of lockdown. So that's enough about me. I said that we're going to just look at very quickly before we get into the four laws of retail. These are all quotes from, as you see, uh, retail CEOs, and these were all from, I think it was December actually. Um, and just to give a view really of what the retail CEOs, obviously sadly, Paul Marchant is no longer CEO of Primark, but I kept it in there because I think that despite what was in the news the other week, I think it's still a very respected brand and continues to be so. Um, so it's challenging. That's it. I'm not going to read all of those out. It's a very challenging marketplace, and we're going to come back to that as well, and what we can do to mitigate some of those headwinds. So the four laws of retail according to your customer. So I'd write and I speak a lot about customer behavior, customer experience, the customer journey. And from that, I've kind of distilled these four things. So we'll go through these. First of all, your customer is your biggest disruptor. So what do I mean by that? A lot of the time, people they refer to Amazon. Oh, they're the biggest disruptor, or the other marketplaces, or from a social, it could be Meta, and what I say is no, it is your customer because look at that dust on the horizon. Well, that's your customer going over the horizon because they're ahead of you. Then they'll always be ahead of you in terms of their demands and their expectations. Granted, some of the time they don't know what they want. Um, and I listen to many retailers say talk about this, and they say, well, yeah, we've got to try to um, influence what they want. When the first phones, not even the smartphones, but the first phones came out, the ability to text was kind of an afterthought from Nokia. It was never one of the big design principles of it, but that obviously became very, very popular. And I'll come back to smartphones a little bit later. So just think about your customer and what they want, what they're demanding, what their expectations are. Um, I love this one because I like to kind of not exactly be provocative. Well, I am actually, but this is more about just challenging conventional thinking and wisdom because I hear so much in retail about loyalty schemes, and they're not actually. It's quite something for those of you who know the retail technology show last week. Archie Norman, the chair of M&S, talked about this, and he said actually most loyalty schemes are disloyalty schemes. And I think that what we can do, that the best that we can do as retailers and brands is to um, ensure that the customer is loyal at the point of transaction, and you hope that you do enough for them to come back for more. So it's and the reason why I put this in is because I think that this gets banded about um, in almost a lazy fashion without really people sort of thinking it through and thinking about the consumer and thinking Because retail, in some ways, is very easy because we're all consumers. So we can all think about our own shopping behavior. And if we have teenage children, well, they're great as a sounding board and to look at the way that they go shopping. So brand loyalty, something to think about anyway. Third one, the rate of retail innovation will never keep up with customer expectations. Now, I think this is still true. I've used these in a number of keynotes that I've done, as I say, around the world, and I think it's true that retail innovation is probably uh, accelerating, and the obvious thing there is AI. Uh, and I think that we're going to on AI just very quickly. I think in a few years' time, maybe less than that, we're going to stop talking about AI because it'll be just like the air we breathe or the electricity that allows us to flick on a light switch. It's going to be ubiquitous, embedded within everything that we do. We're just going to expect it. But at the moment, we're still exploring, still discovering. But as I said earlier on the first of these laws, customer expectations are going to be more and more and more. So think about this. A lot of people now are very familiar with ChatGPT, and they expect that same level of um, interaction, discovery is going to be there when they interact with brands and retailers. The fourth one, um, great retail technology, of which there is plenty. Um, if to be great, it needs to be unnoticed. Yeah. In other words, we talk a lot about seamless customer journeys, and again, I don't really like that seamless, but we know what we mean by it. And uh, for it to really work, then that technology has to be in the background enabling the customer experience rather than being in the forefront of it. Okay, so those were the four laws, and this is just to sort of get things rolling, get things started. Going to talk now a little bit about the current state of the UK retail market, and so quick quote here from PwC. And again, these quotes I'm leaving up on the screen. I'm not going to read all of them out, but you see that was what PwC are saying about the where we are in 2025. Now, I'll just nod towards what we've had coming out of the White House, which we're all, I'm sure, very familiar with and probably very fed up with, and that we are now the UK. The good news is we are now on a par with the penguins because we're all at 10%, apart from China, obviously, and one or two others. But I'm not going to talk any more about that because we just don't know where that's going to go. So you can't really have any meaningful conversation about it. But obviously there is an impact there. Now, just a quick slide here. This is from what I would suggest is a very good resource, Retail Economics. I'm going to come back because I've got when I talk about TikTok a bit later, I've got a resource, a report, sorry, from Retail Economics. There are other sources if you want to do your desktop research on the UK market. The Office for National Statistics is a good, Statista is a good one, but you see some figures. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you see at the top there the total value of UK retail sales. So that's the size of the addressable market. We've known that around about 3 million people are employed in it. One of the other ones there, the fourth one down, proportion of retail sales made online. Now, the ONS produces those figures every month. During or just before COVID, we were in the UK, we were running at around about 19-20%. This is of total sales excluding fuel sales. It peaked at 38% during lockdown and then came back down to about 24 and now is running in 24 around about 27%, which if we put China to one side, globally, it is the most mature online market for e-commerce, for mobile commerce, social commerce, um, the most penetration. Um, and from a grocery point of view, we know that the UK is pretty much the most competitive in globally. So just a few facts and figures there on the UK retail market, and that resource is extract from it here. They do some very good retail economics do. And by the way, I don't have a commercial interest, so it's just simply something that the founder of it does happen to be a friend, but it's grown to be a very good resource. Richard Lim, the founder, speaks at an awful lot of conferences, and if you want to get some very good impartial, independent um, steer on from an economics point of view, a financial point of view about the UK retail market, it's a very good source of information. So again, talking about, I'll just we're probably all aware, but so I'll run through this reasonably quickly. But though the autumn budget last October, the announcements in there, they're all kicking in this week. So this is very topical. And of course, they're hitting retailers. And I'll talk a little bit about what retailers are doing to mitigate some of these, which I'll go through now. So the first, I think we're probably all aware, national insurance contributions. So they're increasing from 13.8 to 15% as of this week. And then the secondary threshold dropping to 5,000. So that's probably the biggest. Um, Secondly, which was talking to retailers, this was kind of expected. National insurance, not necessarily, but that's national living wage increasing by 6.7% was expected. Thirdly, business rates. We could do a whole webinar on business rates, uh, but just to say that that relief that came in during COVID um, is dropping from 75% to 40%, and then that ends 31st of March next year. Now, Labour in their manifesto and the BRC, the British Retail Consortium in particular, have been lobbying for this, for a reform of business rates, because it is outdated. The current business, just to give it some perspective, the current business rate system came in 1990. And to put that in context, Amazon wasn't around until 1994. So that gives you an idea about how outdated the current rates are. And again, at that conference last week, the Retail Technology Show, there was, I think it was Theo Paphitis was talking, and he was quoted as saying, you might have seen it in the retail media, that he believes that business rates are killing the high street. Whether that's quite the case or whether he's just making a plea on behalf of his own businesses, but certainly it is a major challenge. And then lastly, which is less known, is extended producer responsibility. This was first mentioned in 2018, so retailers have had a little while to get to grips with this. And this is basically well, there's a lot packed into there, pardon the pun, but the one thing I pulled out here is that the full net cost, as I say there, of managing and recycling packaging is going to be passed on to the producer, and the producer in this context is the retailer. So there's a challenge there. And these are all coming to, this is the big thing for retailers, is that these are all coming together at the same time. And it's estimated that's going to add about 6 billion onto their retail's annual costs. So that was the budget. Quick history lesson now, because this is now leading up to where we are today. Piggly Wiggly, which happens to be, I think, the best name for a retailer. This is 1916, Memphis, Tennessee. Significance of Piggly Wiggly is that the first supermarket, if you like, it was the first time that we served ourselves as opposed to people serving us. Second, these are sort of the significant events over the decades in retail, which kind of is largely unchanged apart from these sort of things. The barcode, that was introduced in 1949, although it wasn't generally in commercial use until the mid to late 70s. And then the third thing is This guy, Tim Berners-Lee, and of course, he didn't invent the internet, as people say. It's actually the World Wide Web, and that was 1989. So you got some events there which fundamentally changed the nature of retail. Then another one came along, and we all know who this guy is, Steve Jobs. This is him at Macworld in January 2007. And he got up, and there's a great YouTube video. Just search Steve Jobs, Macworld. Uh, I won't say the rest because we'll give the game away. But you only need to see, it's about an hour long. Just see the first 10 minutes. It's fantastic. So he got up and he said there's going to be he's launching a new iPod for those of us who can remember those, an Internet Explorer device, and a phone. And then he said it was nothing, no reaction at all. They all thought it was three new devices. Then he said it again, and on the video you can see there's a kind of a rustling, if you like, in the audience, and people started to realize what he was actually saying. And of course, this was the launch of the first smartphone, the first iPhone, in January 2007. So why do I say that? That we didn't realize it at the time, but that put the power as consumers in our pockets. Like I say, we didn't know it at the time. Um, the social media networks were only just ramping up. LinkedIn was 2003. Um, Twitter was 2000 and or Facebook, I think 2006, Twitter 2008, Instagram 2010. I might have had one of those. I'm trying to do that from memory anyway, and TikTok much later. But this is all around the same, 6 or 7 year period when the means for us to have a voice as consumers and kind of turn the tables on retailers and brands was all starting to happen. And then, of course, the next year we had the global financial crisis, 2008. So what this all did was, first of all, we had the means in our pockets, and then we had the incentive. Um, and we became different shoppers, what I call shopper Mark One. The old cliche about never seeing a BMW or a Mercedes in an Aldi or a little car park. Yeah, well, that was kind of true, but certainly after this, it wasn't. Yeah, if we went shopping at a little or an Aldi or any of the discounters on the high street, we were seen to be smart, savvy shoppers. So that fundamentally changed us. And for 13 years, everything was fine. Yep. Until, and we know what's coming. Yep. 2010, March 2010, um, I'll say in England as opposed to the UK, because I think it was certainly for England, Scotland, and Wales, March the 24th, a Monday. And I know that because of the book that I mentioned earlier. I kept a diary for all 422 days that when we went in and out of lockdown. And of course, we all got used to having a big Q-tip stuck up our noses. And it is actually quite fascinating looking back at some of the things that happened during that period. This webinar is not for that, but it did have and still is having an influence on um, our shopping and so forth. And one of the most obvious is the QR code. We never, before this, the QR code was practically dead and buried. And now it seems to rule our lives. Um, so COVID came, and of course, not long after, sadly, the war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, and supply chain. And we're seeing, I guess this is where the tariffs and so forth, and what we're seeing now in the world economy, we can kind of look back 4 or 5 years and think, well, yeah, we're not out of it yet. And that is causing, the uncertainty. Business does not like uncertainty, but that's what we're facing at the moment, and for the foreseeable future, we will do. So Shopper Mark II was born out of all of that. And what do I mean by Shopper Mark II? Well, take Shopper Mark I and put them on steroids. And who are they? Well, it's all of us. Because all I think, again, I talked a little bit earlier about think about your own shopping behavior. We're incredibly demanding now. and I'll come back to loyalty in a second. Um, we we're like butterflies that will land on a brand and then we'll move to the other one, and we don't have any sense of guilt or anything like that. We're extremely demanding, and we have very, very high expectations, and I think that's only increasing. Um, and that does mean that to attract and retain us, retailers have to do more and more and more to give us a reason to spend our hard-earned uh, cash, which all costs are rising, including ours. We know our utility bills, our council tax, etc., etc. So if we're going to spend our money with you, Mr. Retailer, then there better be a good reason why. So, three characteristics just quickly of Shopper Mark II. Number one, these are the only channels that they recognize. Now, I didn't put it up in my four laws. It used to be five laws, and the other one, if I was to include it, was to say, well, there's no such thing as omni-channel. Now that might seem, it's not meant to be crass or anything like that, but omni-channel is meaningless. But we bandy it about in retail, and if we were in a live session now, and however many people are on the webinar, 100 or what have you, if I went round every single one of you and asked, what does omni-channel mean? I guarantee I will get 100 different answers. And when do you ever hear somebody say, I'm just popping out to do a bit of omnichannel? Yeah, it doesn't happen. Um, yeah, it's shopping. We're kind of morphing now into and evolving into calling it um, unified commerce, which I think is a lot better. Um, but this idea of channels and the word omnichannel, uh, it suggests channels, and it's not. And I think that the serious point I'm trying to make here is that you consider yourself e-commerce or physical, one or the other, but actually it's all part of the same thing as far as the consumer is concerned. And Shopper Mark II, ignore them at your peril. Yeah, we have a voice, and people are not afraid to use that voice and express that. And we see. I'm not going to go into it now, but we've seen over the years examples of where social media uh, can have a distinct impact, negative impact on, particularly, some of the examples have been with airlines. Um, and so there is a voice, and it's changed the dynamic between retail businesses and consumers. Third one, I'm going to come back to loyalty now. Um, I happen to be a Chelsea fan. Now, please don't leave the webinar now at that news. Um, I've been for since I was very, very young. The point I'm making here is that it doesn't matter how well or badly Chelsea and by the by, we're going to struggle to get into Europe next season. But anyway, but because we have our ups and downs, I'm not about to just march off and start supporting Arsenal or Liverpool because they're doing well. So again, my point here is that I think that for retailers and brands, there's a lot to learn from outside of the sector. And I think sports clubs are very good because they treat them as fans, or other sectors will treat them as members or guests. Yeah, the hotel, the hospitality, it's a guest. Clubs, you're a member. But with retail, you're a consumer, you're a customer. And so I just think, and it's interesting actually that the sports brands like Nike, Adidas, Puma, um, they're very good at this. So I think that there's things that retail can learn from outside the sector. Um, Evan, I think is going to, if there are any, I'll just say that if there's any questions, I think Evan is going to, there is a facility to raise one, and he's going to moderate that. If we've got any at this point, that's great. Otherwise, I will crack on with the next part of the webinar.
There's none in just yet.
Okay.
so we
Not
can
a
crack
problem.
on. But
Right.
if any come in, I'll let you know.
Okay, that sounds great. Right. So hopefully that doesn't mean that everybody is asleep or gone to make a cup of tea. Right. So I said at the outset that I'd spend a little bit of time just talking specifically about social media, and I've chosen to use TikTok, and you'll see why in a second. So the opportunity over the next couple of years for social commerce in the UK is said to be around about 16 billion for brands. And as you see there, most of us, nearly all of us, 90%, 9 out of 10 of us are using some sort of social media platform. Um, Whether that be LinkedIn, it could be a combination of all of LinkedIn, of Pinterest, of Twitter, X, although I think a lot of us are coming off that for reasons I won't go into now. Facebook, and we perhaps use them for different reasons. So that's the opportunity. Um, TikTok, just put this up. You see TikTok in the blue there. It's plattered a little bit, but you see there that is the hours per day. I think actually that is, and this is from eMarketer. Um, Seems to be quite low. I've seen other figures that put it higher, but TikTok appears to be the most popular in terms of time. And we'll see in a minute, there is a reason for that. So before we get to that, and QR code, I'll leave this up for a second. So by all means, please scan that because that will get you to this report. I mentioned earlier retail economics. So they've recently brought this report out. I've had a look at it. I'm going to show some stats from it as an example in a second. It's a really good report. It's free to download, and goes into quite a lot of detail about social commerce. I think you'll probably see there, I guess TikTok sponsored it, so it's going to be a lot about that. But it does give you a really good insight into some of the things that I'm discussing here. So yeah, the QR code there will get you to a link which will download that report. And just slowing down now so you get a chance to do that. And I'll go on now to just a few stats from that report. um, we mentioned the 16 billion. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the one thing in the center top there, 82% of social users engage in shopping related activities when using a social entertainment platform. So in other words, one of the things that you'll see in this report that there is a direct correlation between shopping activity and conversion through that and entertainment. Now, you might think, oh, well, well done. No, Einstein. We knew that already, but it's quite interesting looking at this, and that's why TikTok is so popular, and why I would suggest that looking at a social media platform, then that is probably the one to look at first. And I'm going to share something else in just a second, which kind of underlines that, and that is. This graph here, I took as you can probably tell, a screenshot from the report, and TikTok is the most popular in terms of relevant discovery. Yeah, so product discovery through TikTok, and you see the other networks, social media platforms there, but TikTok is and growing. Um, it has around about, well, the last figures I think were 2 years ago. It doesn't TikTok don't publish their user base that often, but I think it's something like 1.5 billion active users now. Okay, so that was social media. What we're going to do now is just have a quick look at the nature, because I think this is quite important to cover the nature of influence. So this smiley chappy here is Dr. Robert Cialdini, and all the way back in the 80s, he wrote this book, Influencing the Psychology of Persuasion. And there were 6 principles, which I'm quickly going to go through now. And think about this in the context of your customers or your future customers and how they think, because this is still very, very relevant today. First one is the idea of reciprocity. So a quick example of that, you go to a restaurant, they bring you the bill, and they might bring some mints with it. In Indian restaurants, it used to be slices of orange, but they don't seem to do that anymore. But a study showed that if they do that, then the tip will increase by 3%. So we like that idea of reciprocity. Second one, bit obvious, I know, scarcity. Um, Rolex, for any of us who are fortunate enough, I wish, to be buying a Rolex, well, they deliberately limit the production run of them. Certain models, you can't even walk into a Rolex dealer and buy them because they're just not available. You have to go on a waiting list of many years. So scarcity is the second. Authority. Think about advertisements for toothpaste. What's the one common theme throughout nearly all of them? They have somebody who claims to be a dentist, usually in a white coat, because they know best. Quite interesting. So, authority figure is going to have an influence on our purchasing. Yeah, the amount of fluoride or how white it is or how white it's going to make your teeth. And of course, it's all been scientifically proven, etc., etc., etc. So, number three, authority. Um, the fourth one, commitment, which obviously, if you're going to jump out of a balloon at God knows how many miles high, you need a bit of commitment. Um, we form opinions and viewpoints and positions, and we then feel that we need to maintain those. So I'll give you an example. And apologies to all the cyclists on the webinar. Um, cycling, yeah, great, but not when you're riding two abreast on a main busy road and I'm trying to get to work or to an appointment or whatever. It just becomes a right pain. Now, I've adopted that position, and that's kind of me now. Even though, truthfully, no, I go out cycling and so on and so forth. Although I don't tend to wear lycra in public, but anyway, that's another story. But yeah, we adopt those positions and we tend to stick to them. Fifth is liking. Yeah, we like ice cream, but we like who we buy from. So we want to be, what that means is we want to be aligned with the values of the brand that we buy from. And that is particularly so in the younger millennials and Gen Z. Social proof. So very much so in a social media um, scenario, but also have you ever found yourself unexpectedly passing a queue and you wonder, well, there's a queue, what's that for? And you might even join it. Um, so there's a social proof that we look for. So those are the six that Mr. Cialdini, Dr. Cialdini came up with. And then a few years later, he had added a seventh. And the seventh, I think, is the most interesting and the most relevant, and that is unity. So you see here, for those of you old enough to remember Cheers from the 1990s, the US sitcom. So what was the strap line for Cheers? It was where everybody knows your name. In other words, we like that sense of community. And that's what retailers and brands. I was at this same retail tech show last week. I interviewed on stage the former CEO of Gymshark, and Steve was talking about this and how they built up that community first with the bodybuilders in the gyms, and then it extended beyond that. But it was all very much that sense of belonging, sense of community. And I think that's probably out of all seven, that is the most relevant and the most powerful. Now, I mentioned in the intro that we were going to look at some where social influencing uh, goes well and when it doesn't quite go so well. So I'm not sure how many people, I'm sure some of you know the story, so I'll keep it fairly brief. This is Dylan Mulvaney, who is a transgender influencer. Now, Bud Light is the most popular, at the time, was the most popular beer in America, the parent company, Anheuser-Busch. However, the new marketing director realized, well, sales actually were slowing. They had a problem with sales. And so the marketing director, she felt that they needed to reach a new audience. So they contacted Dylan, and Dylan had been posting every day for a year on his, must be a her now, her transition from being a man. And so Bud thought, right, we'll contact Dylan. Dylan can be involved in the campaign. And so they put her picture, as you can see, on a can of Bud Light. Now, the only problem was that your typical Bud Light drinker in North America is a beer swilling redneck, drives a pickup truck, yeah, likes to have a few with his mates at the weekend, etc., etc. They didn't take too kindly to being associated with this, unfortunately, and that's what happened with their sales, and they never really recovered from that. Now, just quickly as an example of when, well, I'm going to play a video. Again, a brand that you may have heard of, Liquid Death. Again, I had the pleasure a couple of years ago in Vegas of interviewing their marketing director. Um, Liquid Death started in 2019 selling water, that's all it is, water, uh, from their website. And then in 2024, I think it was last year, they were valued at 1.4 billion. I'm just going to play a video and then uh, tell you that what I believe is the lesson from all of this. But Liquid Death's marketing is quite something to behold, as we're going to witness in a second. Here we go.
Hi, I'm a professional actor, and I'm getting paid to tell you about a revolutionary new product. A bunch of marketing fuckboys have tricked you into thinking that water is just some girly trick for yoga moms. Just look at all the cute brand names and dainty little bottles. Well, hold on to your hot dogs. I got news. Water isn't cute. Water is deadly. It kills innocent surfers and snowboarders and every year water is responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths. Energy drinks only kill like one or two kids. So please, don't fall for the marketing bullshit. Water is not yoga. Water is liquid death. And that's why this brand needs to exist. To finally give water the ice cold can and ice cold name it deserves. A brand that parents will hate, but kids might love. Made from the deadliest stuff on earth. Please, enjoy responsibly.
I said that they're
Hi.
let's see if we can, right, we'll come on to the takeaways in a second, but before we do that, yeah, I said that it was slightly different. Now, I've used that in the past as an example of great, well, I think is fantastic viral marketing. And if you look at their website, there's some other examples of that. But it's also an example like Bud now of needing to know your customer, because as some of you may know, Liquid Death quite recently announced that they were withdrawing from the UK market, which I thought, oh, well, that's great. Bang goes my example. But actually, no, it kind of underlines the fact that you need to know your customer. Bud clearly didn't in the way that they needed to. And I actually, at a hospitality show earlier this week, there's a new, it was launched 2 years ago, I think. Uh, Again, water in a can called Drip, if you've seen that. And I got chatting to them, and they just felt that the whole connotation with Liquid Death, well, it would, if you're younger, the parents wouldn't really want your younger children, perhaps young teenagers, to be associated with a brand like that. I mean, one of their other images is of playing basketball with a severed head. Got nothing to do with water or anything like that, but that was it. It's really interesting, and I'd urge you to have a look at it. There's some that you might think, yeah, it might spark some ideas. Others where you might think, that's really not for me, but certainly it grabs your attention. So, um, we're nearly as I always say, kind of at this point, time to wake up again because we're coming to the takeaways. And yeah, we're pretty much bang on time. So three takeaways that I want. If you don't remember anything else from the last 45 minutes, um, think about these three things. Okay. Number one, whether it is e-commerce, online, in-store, QR code, coupon, voucher, brochure, catalog, you name it, whatever, make it effortless. I think this is actually a Gartner phrase, which I liked. Um, Effortless, in other words, I mentioned the word seamless earlier on in the webinar, but think about whatever it happens to be. And what I urge people to do, and I talk to retail um, senior retailers about this, and I said, have you ever actually physically, whether on the keyboard or physically from in store, walked the customer journey? And what I mean by this is, don't just in store. So let's say, I don't know, I'm sure we all reasonably familiar with Westfield in London. They got two, one at White City and one at Stratford. So if you're going to walk your customer journey, you happen to have a store there. Don't just go to the store. Start it from perhaps even before you arrive. Let's say you're driving there, and that journey starts possibly when you leave home, because there are going to be a lot of things that are going to influence how you're feeling uh, when you finally arrive at the store, let alone what goes on inside that store. So walk the journey and just ask yourself, is it effortless for my customer? So that's the first one. Second, so this is I always like this example. So this is the Science Museum in London. And I, again, I say to retailers, think about what you could learn from a museum. Because for me, a bit like perhaps visiting a zoo, even for us as adults, there's always we're on a voyage of discovery, which and we're curious to know what's around the next corner. So a good example of that would be Harrods or Selfridges in London, and plenty of other stores. I think smaller stores that are like that. I was in New York in January for NRF and visited the Banana Republic store in Manhattan in Soho, where they had um, their flagship store over two floors. And the way that it was laid out was that, yeah, there were all sorts of little nooks and crannies, and you couldn't see the back of the store from the front. And so you wanted to explore. So here, they could have just stuck the escalator there, but no. What, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, I would be wondering, oh, what's through that portal? What's at the top of the escalator? What am I going to witness or experience rather when I get to the top? So that's a second. Think about stimulating our curiosity and inspiring us. And the third one is this one. Above all, be relevant. And I will read this one out because I love it. It's from 2018, but it's still itself incredibly relevant. So, dear Amazon, I bought a toilet seat because I needed one. Necessity, not desire. I do not collect them. I am not a toilet seat addict. No matter how temptingly you email me, I'm not going to think, oh, go on then, just one more toilet seat. I'll treat myself. And I'm not picking on Amazon there, but I am. But because actually, no, everybody does it, don't they? You search for something, you even purchase it, you know what your email inbox and your pop-up ads are going to be for the next 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So in context and be relevant. That's probably the most important thing out of this whole 45 minutes or so that I've been talking. And I think that is probably about it. I'll leave you with this thought. Jason Dorsey runs something in America called the Center for Generational Studies. And what he looks at are the behaviors of the generations, particularly the younger millennials, Gen Z, And he says technology is only new when you can remember what it was like before. Have a think about that, and then think about that when you're thinking about your customers and the way they shop your brand. And that, I think, is me. Thank you very much. Evan, over to you.
Perfect, Andrew. Thank you so much for that really informative session. I want to invite Owen to speak if the technology will allow him. If it will not, then I can. Oh, he's
I'm here.
perfect. Perfect, Owen. Happy
Okay.
days.
I'll run. Andrew, thank you very much for that. That was very, very informative. I'll run through this fairly quickly. I don't know if I.
Just as Owen is setting that up, I just want to invite if anybody has any questions, just to put them into the Q&A box so we can answer them.
Okay, Evan, I might ask you, can you, I don't think the administration here is allowing me to share my screen as
I
easy, so I've run, oh, if you wouldn't mind.
will
Well,
do that
well,
for you.
while Evan is doing that, just to give you a quick idea, but I'm going to talk about the Enterprise Ireland supports. These have been sort of formulated over many, many, many years, and really the whole purpose is to help companies to focus. It's not to subvent costs. And just to reiterate what Andrew was saying there earlier, it's about knowing your customers, and it's not a scattergun approach. So there's different demographics, as I mentioned, Gen Z, boomers, all the various other categories. So if your target audience falls into those particular categories, find out what channels they operate in, and target those channels with the relevant content. So, and that's the essence of what our support's about. I go quickly through it. Evan, if you could go to the next slide, please. Uh, it's broken into 4 categories. We have the market research center. This is about finding out, discovery, identification, and all that. So you know that if you are targeting the UK, US, South Africa, wherever it is, that you have the relevant stats of the demographics and who you're trying to target in those markets. Do we have the strategic marketing review is a 5 to 10 day process where companies can sit down with an external consultant and develop a targeted marketing plan. Because typically a lot of companies say, oh, we're doing business here, we're doing business there, we're doing everywhere. There's no focus. So this is sort of bring it all together. So all the team are saying, yes, we are targeting the UK, we're targeting south of Watford, we're not going anywhere else, just to make sure things are you have what you call the in equine terms, you have your writing instructions. So this works really, really well. The Market Discovery Fund, again, the link below at the very end of the page, that will bring you to all of these supports, so you can read about them. They're all accessed via your client advisor. So don't just jump in and start applying. It has to be agreed. The Market Discovery Fund is where you are, if you are currently in the UK and you want to go US. It helps you to check the market, to make sure there's relevance before you put boots on the ground. It's to make sure that there is an opportunity there for you, and what part of the US or whatever country it should be. My own fund, the digital marketing capability, is once you've identified the market that you are going after, this is to sort of bring together the digital content, the online. Now, offline exists, but it's a different. If as Andrew was saying there, consumer behavior is different online than it is offline. So you have to know what that behavior is, what they will ingest or digest, and how to get to them. And the digital marketing capability does that. It's not about building a web presence. It's about the discovery of what needs to be built. So it's a strategy before the structure, which helps us, because some companies will just charge in and say, we need a website, and then there's no footfall to that website. So the digital marketing capability is the way to that. Evan, if you go to the next slide, please.
Yep.
So this is just the digital marketing capability because it's my program. It outlines what you should be doing there. Okay, there's a strategy piece, the target market analysis, competitor analysis, what's your digital value proposition, branding, communication, content development. So one follows the other, and not in strict order, but it's strategy, as I said earlier, before structure. It doesn't cover the build of a website, platform acquisition, or any licensing or anything like that, or what you might pay to Google or Bing or to LinkedIn. It's the strategy of what you need, when the frequency, the terms, and the content for those channels. One more then, Evan. And then the strategic marketing review, there's more detail about that. It really is to help companies, senior managers in a company, to identify the marketing plan, and then help the delivery of that using external consultants. It's up to 5,000 is the grant. It usually is 6,300. So it's 7 days at 80%. Sorry, 7 days at 900 at a grant rate of 80% gives you the 3,000. We will pay 5,000. You're exposed for 1,300. It's an exercise extremely well worthwhile doing, because it gives you the way forward for the whole organization. And then the next one, again, the last one is just a market discovery fund. This is quite an expansive fund, so I won't go into the details there. You can see the costs. Eye-watering 150,000. It doesn't have to be. That's the upper limit. So with that, I will hand back, and with 1 minute left in the webinar.
Perfect. Just go on to the next slide. Q&A is open. I do realize we are hitting the 12 o'clock. If there's any questions in, we will try to answer them. But I just briefly want to mention, while people are typing in, our next webinar in the series of webinars is next Thursday. It'll be April the 17th at 2 p.m. So the webinar topic is influencer marketing and content creation. And we're joined by Conor Cochran and Wendy Slattery. So I just will keep this up while I check if there are any questions. Sorry, the questions come in. Is this report and any other by Enterprise Ireland available to us all? I'm under the impression that they may mean this slide deck. The slide deck will be made available, and I'm under the assumption, Andrew, that the reports you've used as well are accessible. I've accessed them before. All you have to do is provide your email address and they'll send them across to you.
Yeah.
And yes, that seems to be the only other question there. So if there is nothing else to be asked, I believe we can close the session. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Andrew for joining the session, for giving an incredibly insightful presentation, and big thanks to Owen as well for running through our supports available to our clients. And to reiterate what Owen has said, any issues, any questions, reach out to your client advisor, and any questions regarding the UK market, reach out to either myself, Anna, or Rachel. So at that, I will end the session, and thank you very much for joining.